Okay, hello. This is a modification of my summary diagram on how the USA has a continuous unbroken string of conflict creation in the Middle East since Iran-Iraq War. Now, the key modification is right here. The first Gulf War kicked off Al-Qaeda attacks on the U.S. beginning in 1992. Uh, 11 attacks, all right, before 9/11. Kicked off by the first Gulf War. All right. So I want to review this entire diagram again with that modification. So, as I said, I started this section on U.S. creation of conflict in the Middle East by teaching the summary diagram, and it was attacked by people who knew jack squat nothing, didn't know shit. Right? That's why they can attack it. They know no factual basis for any of this. So I painstakingly proved every single point in this diagram factually. But I know the masses still retain nothing. Nothing's in their heads. Only a few small percentage of people, tiny, retain something. And even then, I'm sure none of them study this. So they're not really retaining much, right? They're more open to what I'm saying. But like no one retains jack. All right. It's the great white wall. That's what you're fighting against. Big blank space. Tabula rasa, empty slate. All right. So, therefore, the Lars will attack again by shifting all focus onto a simple, stupid, baseless, bullshit, attack. Make it into a big wave. Whether it's a single point attack, a mocking joke, whipping up the masses into an angry mob, all right, an ad hominem attack. All right. They'll make some simple, stupid attack, whip it up into a big wave of social reality, and that's reality for the masses. They know nothing else. You can pass this in a 10-second blurb, and that's going to dominate the minds of the masses. That's the reality. Simple, stupid, baseless. But the wave always dominates, because that's all they know. Just waving in front of their face and their cell phones. That's the reality. So the USA has been causing trouble in the Middle East. 1951, Iran nationalized oil. Oh, we got to overthrow their asses. We overthrow their government. Democracy. Prime Minister. British-style parliament. 1953 coup. That leads to the 1979 revolution, where they eventually overthrew the dictator we installed, the Shah of Iran. All right. Then, 1970, U.S. reached peak oil production, right? Our maximum production capacity. And then in 71, we lose control of oil price to OPEC. So in 73, OPEC screws us with an embargo, right? Oil prices jack up 4 times, kills our economy. Then in 79, with the Iran Revolution, right, which is outgrowth of our coup here in 53, oil production out of Iran plunges, right? Plus you got the Carter embargo, and oil prices triple. That kills our economy again, right? Get stagflation. But then in 1980, the Iran-Iraq War starts. You got 2 OPEC nations fighting each other. Bust OPEC unity. Oil prices drop through this war. All right. Do I got a graph of this? Oh, yeah. Okay. So here is the Iran-Iraq War begins. Here's what prices fall to by the end of the Iran-Iraq War. Starts climbing again until the first Gulf War. Then the first Gulf War kills OPEC again. Now, I'm not saying the war was only factor prior to 86. But in 86, it was the only factor that brought down all prices like a rock. The war was a key factor. It's one of four factors here. All right. Weak economy, strong dollar, North Sea, and Alaska oil kicking in. But by 86, all those were non-factors. Right? So Iran-Iraq War is only one of four factors, but sole factor. Here, it is a sole factor. All right. So now, during the Iran-Iraq War, USA provided intelligence and weapons support, other war materials to both sides. Both our ally Iraq and Saddam Hussein, and to our enemy Iran. We're fueling the war. Now, the key outcome of the war was Iraq was left with a devastated economy and $86 billion in war debt. And that became the key cause for the first Gulf War. Right? So this is how they're linked. Iran-Iraq War to the first Gulf War. Right? Through the economic devastation of Iraq and its massive war debt. All right. So the U.S. further helped increase that war debt and economic destruction in Iraq by providing Iran key weapons and intelligence just before and during Iran's successful 1986 offensive, in which they seized Iraq's Fall Peninsula, Iraq's only access to the Persian Gulf. Now they can't pump out oil, so they're screwed. Well, that is not good for their economy. That helps their economic crisis. That helps build a war debt. But also, information of the Iran-Contra weapon supply to Iran is made public in November of 86. All right. That causes Iraq to attack the USS Stark, putting 2 Exocet missiles into it, killing 37 U.S. sailors. The Reagan administration, very next day, rushes to respond. Oh, it's an accident. It's an accident. It's an accident. My ass, it's an accident. They're only trying to protect themselves. It's either an accident or it's intentional. If it's intentional, then you got to say, well, there's got to be a motive. That motive points back to the Iran-Contra hearings, which Reagan administration is being grilled on right now. When was this attack? May 17th, I believe. I think May 5th is when the Iran-Contra hearings started. Right? All right. So now, because Iran seized Iraq's Fall Peninsula, they're right on the border of Kuwait, right on the edge of Kuwait. And Kuwait's a small country with little defense. That's essentially right on the border with Saudi Arabia. Iran could roll through Kuwait, invade Saudi Arabia. Right? Sunni nations are threatened. They start jacking up oil production. Right? And oil prices plummet. How do they plummet? Like a rock. Bam! What? February of 86. Bam! All right. All right, so now, without access to the Persian Gulf, Iraq must pump oil to Kuwait, ship it out in Kuwaiti tankers. All right. And that's an act of war. So Iran increases attacks on Kuwaiti tankers, which are carrying Iraqi oil. Clear act of war. And then, because they're getting attacked by Iran, Kuwait seeks and gets U.S. protection, U.S. naval escort of their tankers. That results in 9 engagements with Iran. We're effectively fighting an undeclared war with Iran. I mean, it's pretty low intensity. Iran is always very cautious. They do what they can get away with without a big major military response, right? That's typically their profile. Supporting proxies. Recently, they're doing these drone attacks, right? Like swarm drone attacks against Saudi targets, right? Hitting some Americans, at like Saudi bases on the side, right? All right. So, because we're giving them support, because we got an act of war, right? U.S. naval escort for Kuwait tankers is a clear act of war. That increases conflict with Iran. They get pissed off. They start laying these drifting mines in the shipping lanes. And one of our ships hits with them, one of them, the USS Roberts. Nearly blows off its stern, its fantail. Next day, we respond with Operation Praying Mantis, right? Sink about half the major ships of the Iran Navy. Destroy a couple of their oil platforms. And then a little bit later, in the heightened tension, one of our ships, the USS Vincennes, is being threatened by Iranian speedboats. And under the tense situation, they misidentified an aircraft leaving Iran, heading toward them as a military aircraft, and they shot it down. It turned out to be a civilian passenger aircraft, an Airbus, killing 290 civilians. Right? So all this is happening because of conflict we're creating. Now, because we're given escort, which is an act of war, that builds trust and credibility, comity between Kuwait and USA. They trust us. We're saving their asses. All right, so Kuwait, because they trust us, they take the director of CIA, William Webster's advice to exploit Iraq's economic crisis, right? And pressure Iraq by overproducing oil. So Kuwait is overproducing oil, dropping oil price, stealing money from Iraq, right? When Iraq's in big trouble economically. So Iraq warns Kuwait 4 times. Hey, you better stop overproducing oil or we're going to invade your ass. We're going to war. Clear threats of war. Right? And you better pay $2.4 billion in stolen oil. And they accuse Kuwait of being a puppet of the USA, conspiring with us to hurt the Iraq economy, which we were. Right? And then they put 100,000 troops on the border of Kuwait, poised to attack. Right? So they're ready to invade Kuwait. Now, Saddam, he wants to invade Kuwait. I believe, this is my opinion, I believe his biggest motive was not just Kuwait overproduction, but if he took Kuwait, he would essentially double his oil production capacity and his oil reserves. With that, he could buy plenty of military hardware to dominate the Middle East militarily. Plus, it would give him plenty of spare production capacity, more than his country needs, with which he could cut oil production and thus jack up oil price. He would get control of oil price. Saddam alone, by himself, would have plenty of spare production capacity to be a monitor of spare production, which means he controls oil price. You can't allow either of those. That's obvious strategic, you know, worst case scenario for USA. All right. Plus, Saddam gave some other BS reasons. I'm not going to discuss them. But a key factor was a key reason why Saddam invaded was because USA gave him 3 absolutely clear, no equivocation, green light signals. It wasn't just, staying silent, right? Silence is consent. It was openly saying, go ahead, invade. 3 green light signals. Back to back. To back. Right? Now, that's after 4 war threats and putting 100,000 troops on the border. That's, you got to be retarded to think that's not a threat. You know it's a threat. And then you give this, that's crazy. That is intentional. That's a sucker move. It's not stupid. This is beyond stupid. It's an intentional sucker move. So, Iraq invades Kuwait. You get the first Gulf War. Right? Key outcome of the first Gulf War is massive war debt for both Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. Especially Saudi Arabia. Kuwait was less of a factor in the destruction of OPEC. Right? If you look at their production volumes, it's pretty much matching their pre-war production volumes. But not Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia doubled their production volumes pre-war because they got all of Iraq's, 3.5 million of Iraq's quota, million barrels per day. Right? So the key conflict in OPEC was Saudi Arabia producing way above what they were before the war, and then they're refusing to cut production. Why? Because they got this massive war debt from the first Gulf War. Right? Especially because they picked up $36 billion of USA's $60 billion war price tag. Right? So because OPEC is busted, oil prices fell at a time when they should have been climbing, especially with the fall of the USSR and Russian production being cut in half. A loss of 5.5 billion barrels, a loss of 6 million barrels per day. If you take into account the drop in production from Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan. 6 million barrels per day lost. That's massive. Plus, at the same time, you have Asian rising economies, increasing demand. Oil prices should have been climbing. But they fell like this. Now, this here could be due to a contributor here is Asian financial crisis, right? That's contributing to this fall. But up until here, right, it's all OPEC. OPEC being busted. All right. First big outcome. OPEC busted. Oil prices fall. War is effective at controlling oil price. That's what I'm saying. That's what the facts prove. B, the first Gulf War kicked off Al-Qaeda attacks, beginning in 1992. So Al-Qaeda attacks didn't start with 9/11, 2001. They began in 1992. First attacks, attempt to kill U.S. soldiers in the Goldmoor Hotel in Somalia. Same day they tried to kill soldiers at the Aden Movenpick Hotel in Yemen, but this failed. But it was an attempt. 93. Al Qaeda tried to destroy the World Trade Center, Twin Towers, with a truck bomb in the underground parking garage. 93. A few months later, FBI foiled an Al Qaeda attempt to blow up the Lincoln Tunnel, the Holland Tunnel, George Washington Bridge, Statue of Liberty, and United Nations. Right? That's a massive coordinated attack. So Al Qaeda is attacking us because of the first Gulf War, not at 9/11, but before. I didn't think to integrate this. Then, in 94, the planner of the Beirut Marine Barracks bombing instructs Al Qaeda on how the bombing got USA to withdraw the troops. This all right. So this inspired Bin Laden, Al Qaeda, to conduct bombings to get the U.S. out of the Middle East. Then in 94, there's a plot to kill Clinton in the Philippines that was it failed, but was discovered by the Secret Service. In 94, there was an airline bombing of a 747 Philippines. Right? I mentioned that's not against U.S., but I mentioned that because they're using aircraft now. In 95, there's a car bomb at U.S. Military Training Center in Riyadh. Remember, Bin Laden's pissed off at permanent stationing of U.S. forces in Saudi Arabia, killing 5 Americans. I believe they're contractors training the Saudi military. And 2 Indians were killed and wounding 60 others. 96, truck bomb explodes outside Khobar Towers, Saudi Arabia, housing U.S. troops, killing 19, wounding 400. Just like the Beirut barracks. Right? 98, bombing of 2 U.S. embassies, Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, killing 224, wounding 4,500. That's a lot. That's a lot wounded. 2000, failed attempt to boat bomb the USS Sullivan. Also, U.S. authorities captured Ahmed Reza at the border crossing at Port Angeles. I guess that's Washington, carrying bomb-making equipment intended to bomb the Los Angeles International Airport. Right, so that's a failed attempt. Then in 2000, you have the boat bombing of the USS Cole, killing 17 sailors and injuring 37. 2001, 9/11 attacks. All right. So the first Gulf War kicked off Al Qaeda attacks starting in 92. Right? Then the first Gulf War, another result of the first Gulf War was the WMD inspections between 1991 to 98 for 7 years in Iraq. Now, during this time, the USA, CIA played dirty games with WMD inspections while 567,000 Iraqi kids were dying due to the WMD-based economic sanctions. All right. So the first Gulf War became the main motive for bin Laden's attack on 9/11. He had 6 main reasons. 4 of them were directly related to the first Gulf War. All right. For example, the weapons of mass destruction inspections and the UN sanctions were a result of the first Gulf War. That led to the death of what bin Laden said were 600,000 Iraqi kids. He exaggerated a little bit, right? And then bin Laden's pissed off about U.S. wars on Muslims in the Middle East. What was the only war? First Gulf War, right? About 100,000 killed. Then he's pissed off at permanent U.S. occupation forces in the Middle East to steal Arab resources. 5,000 U.S. soldiers permanently stationed in Saudi Arabia. Arab resources and wealth. He's pissed off about, he believes we're stealing their oil. Then he's pissed off about U.S.-Saudi collusion to lower oil price. But he was wrong. It was really this war debt and OPEC being fractured. It's pretty shocking how simple-minded bin Laden was in his understanding of oil price factors, right? He just attributed to collusion. And that resulted in welfare cutbacks in Saudi Arabia, increasing Saudi poverty. Saudi's average standard of living was cut basically in half, from $25,000 a year to $13,000 a year. U.S. unstinted support for Israel. That is non-Gulf War related. U.S. corruption and obstruction of Sharia law. That is not Gulf War related either, right? But the lion's share of his reasons were due to the first Gulf War. Get that in your head. Try to remember that. Try to retain something. Goodness sakes. So the 9/11 attacks gave us the war on terror. Right, here's his reasons. Gives us the attack. Gives us the war on terror. Big boost in military spending. War on terror. Biggest in our history. Then the second Bush administration uses the 9/11 attacks with a meticulously planned strategy to conduct a bait and switch using the 9/11 attacks by Al-Qaeda and bin Laden to justify an invasion of Iraq, who had nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks. Also based on fake WMD, which they weren't even trying to look for during the 7 years of inspections. So that gives us the Iraq invasion war, based upon manufactured evidence for bogus WMD claims. The Bush administration manufactured crap. Yellow cake out of Niger. Aluminum tubes for centrifuges. Bullshit. WMD training to Al-Qaeda. Bullshit. Bush administration pressuring intelligence agencies to give them the answers they wanted, and when they didn't get it, they created their own intelligence agency using one guy, Chalabi, as their witness, their key witness. One guy, a liar, known fabricator, known cheat, tax fraud felon, who wanted to be president of Iraq. He wanted Saddam kicked out, so he's president. And the U.S. Cheney and Wolfowitz wanted the president. Corrupt scumbag. All right. So, 2 reasons. 9/11, which Iraq had nothing to do, and WMD, which didn't exist, and which they weren't even looking for hard. They're playing bullshit, dirty games. All right? I taught this whole lesson. This is just a bare bones summary. I taught a massive lesson. Scott Ritter, in detail, what was done. He said, CIA's not only were they not trying to find WMD, they just wanted the U.S. public to believe Saddam had WMD and was concealing it and lying, which is what they used to get the Iraq invasion war. And he said they obstructed, sabotaged our efforts to find WMD, the UN efforts. He said they screwed his missions. And they played dirty games to get bombing attacks on religious holidays. March 15th, 2005. And then Ramadan, 2005. Coup attempts, assassination attempts on Saddam. So they weren't even trying to find WMD. Then they used WMD as one of the big reason with a massive scare campaign. And the Iraq invasion became a big moneymaker for the power elite. I showed you all the ways to make money off of war in the Middle East. And what was the impact? Did this help decrease the terrorist threat? No! It massively increased the terrorist threat. Significant expansion of radical Islamic jihadism worldwide, including homegrown terrorists, right? Expansion of terrorist attacks to other nations who participated in the invasion. It kicked off a Shia-Sunni civil war, Arab-on-Arab terror, destabilized the Middle East with formation of a Shia bloc. Increased the killing in Syria, motivating a Shia-Sunni proxy war in Syria. And it formed ISIS, which is a whole new damn war. So all these wars are linked together. I know it's hard to keep it in your head. All right? I know you don't remember all the factual detail which I used to prove it. So now the liar's going to say, all they got to do is make a big baseless wave. Write a 10-second blurb. Get everyone said, oh, it's crazy, ha, ha, ha. And that's going to be the sole basis of the reality of 99.99999% of the masses. Stupid, baseless, ridiculous. But it's going to dominate. That's all they're going to know. So that's what they're going to believe. Especially with social reinforcement. And it's never going to change. All I hope, my only hope, is to get to a tiny percentage of people. You know, if it's just 0.00001%. Honestly, that's all I hope for. A small percentage of intelligent, honest people. They're out there, but they're few and far between. All right, that's it for that.